Hey guys, hope you're having an excellent day today. Welcome to another video at Atlanta Brick Co TV. Today we have a very interesting subject for our video, something we really haven't covered that much in the past. We're going to be talking about Lego motors, 9-volt motors, power functions, and powered up. They've been using these very interesting, very cool pieces in Lego sets for a long time, pretty much since the 80s, early 80s, late 80s, 90s, 2000s and beyond. So basically all the Lego sets that you know and love, there's been some sort of powered component to them, at least in some of the sets, some of the larger sets usually. In this video, I'm just going to cover the basics. I'm not going to go into really crazy elaborate techniques to move Lego models. I'm going to be talking mostly about the elements themselves, how they work, the differences, and that sort of thing. I'm hoping to do a longer video later that will give us some ideas for motorized creations and really cool features with that, but I'm not necessarily an expert at that, and we do want to have just a basic video showing how to use them, because we've actually had quite a few people ask us, how do these things work, especially powered up, the latest version. There's a lot of confusion there, so we're just going to have a basic rundown. So let's get started with the first of the mainstream Lego powered pieces, and that would be what I like to call the 9-volt motor. In this case, you have a 9-volt battery box. There were also plug-in versions with the trains. We're not going to cover those today. We're mostly looking at the things that were used in sets and vehicles and other things like that. We're also not going to cover Mindstorms, NXT, any of those education-based learning, computer-based systems. There's also the Lego Studio sets had cameras and editing software. We don't have the capability to use those right now. We need a special computer from the 95, 98 era of computers. Now, I have never really played with these because they were a little before my time. They would have been 80s and 90s. I was born in 94 and really got into Lego around 99, 2000, and then onwards. So these would have been produced before then, because after that time the power functions will arrive. We'll talk about those in a second. So this one actually houses, let's see if I can get it open. There we go. This one houses a bunch of AA batteries, and this particular piece was exceptionally clean. We found it in our basement in our graveyard, and you've got the two switches on the top and the one 2x2 brick with the metallic edges, which actually transfers the current via bricks. So you see those ads sometimes, or you used to see those ads, where they have those electric bricks and they do things and magnets and stuff. Lego did it back in the 80s and 90s, so that is old tech that they're revamping, Lego compatible stuff. That's the inside. We can put the case on so it's a little bit less likely to mess with the batteries. There's the right and left button. They both do different things, but in a similar way, so it has a different action depending on what piece you put on there. The first thing that you're going to typically use with a 9-volt motor is the cord. It's also got those 2x2 bricks with the metal pieces on the studs. That transfers the current. It's very interesting. It is similar to what power functions does as well. But you've got your attachment point there, and now the current will be transferred from the box itself to the tip of the cord. It's pretty straightforward so far. What you're actually doing with the 9-volt motor is powering the various engines, lights, and even sound bricks. So we found quite a few cool old 9-volt related items, accessories that can be used with these pieces for all sorts of different purposes. The one thing I really like about the older 9-volt pieces and sets is that powered bricks. You can run a current through these 2x4 plates, actually use them in your construction to get the lights or the sound bricks wherever you need to be and still be attached to your battery pack. So that's something that has not been used since, and it's really a shame because they're so cool. It's probably safety related because you have active currents going through little metal pieces and that kids are playing with. There's probably some safety concerns there if you're not careful, and so Lego is taking the safer route rather than the cooler route, and I'm a little sad by that, but at the same time it is pretty neat. So as you can see, as I press the one button, it's just a steady glow. You can't really see it because the lights in the studio are pretty bright, but you get the steady glow on one button and the blinking on the other. So depending on which button you push, the action is different, at least for this light. Not all of them are the same. Some of them are just steady on both of them, but some of them have some pretty cool features. You could also change the color of the light by putting a little lighting a little piece over the top, and those are pretty cool. And here we have the double light in a 1x4 equivalent. I think it's actually a little shorter than a 1x4 brick, the surface area of the plastic piece anyway. So you got the steady glow on one side and the blink on the other. Interestingly, if you swap the rotation of the piece, the steady glow and blinking lights have now switched on the button of the battery box. So you can have a lot of customization there. You've also got a light going out from the 1x2 brick instead of coming up from the 1x2 brick. And this one just has the steady glow. There's no blinking feature on this brick. It seems to me that the blinking versus steady is determined by the piece itself, which is interesting. Now, because they only had a couple different light pieces for this era, I mean, that's still pretty good, even considering today's standards of powered up pieces. They had ways to customize it and make it more creative, and I'll show you that here. They actually had clear pieces, not only these smaller lights, but also these bigger bricks, and you could light those up too. So you could have illuminated signs in your city. It's really quite neat. You also had these fiber optic bricks. The light would go on the inside underneath the piece. You could snap them on there. And then the light would then project out from the piece. So it basically spread and transferred the light from the one light into the three spots on the larger brick. So that's pretty neat. And then you could even put stuff on there to light it up too. I think these can snap on, yeah. So you can't see it too well because it's pretty bright in here, but you've got the illuminated pieces in there. I really like all the customization options you have with all these pieces. Like you could have these plates going in different directions. You have the wires. You have all these different lights and lighting features that you can, do all these police, taxi, station. You got the lighting caps too, so they can go over the top. And it's really neat. This is the first time I've ever had the opportunity to play with them, and it's just really special. But let me show you guys the last party trick here. You got sound bricks. And just like the lights that blink or are steady, you have the different sounds for different buttons that you press. So sounds like a siren, sounds more like a UFO. They're both kind of siren sounding actually. So it has been a while since LEGO used sound bricks in their pieces. I know the Powered Up has a few options which are pretty cool, but this is an individual piece that has its own sound that you snap down, and once you power it up with either of the two currents, it'll do something, and that's just super cool. So here we have the larger 9-volt motor wired up to the 9-volt battery. And it still works pretty good. It's interesting to note that this motor has several gears going on already, and that's a pretty big motor piece in there. So I imagine this has quite a bit of torque, which means a lot of strength to the motor, and could still totally be used in creations that you just needed it to move one direction or the other direction, because it goes left or right based on which buttons you're pushing. It could be super useful in like a crane or other cool creation you'd be working on, so that's pretty neat. This one works great too. This is the smaller 9-volt motor. It's a little flatter. It also has metal inside that axle piece, so that's really cool. I think it's just, yeah, there's an axle in it. The other one you can insert an axle into. This one has an axle sticking out of it. And very cool. I really like how you can go either direction based on which button you're pushing, so that's pretty neat. These parts are super cool. Sad to see that LEGO took a different direction and wanted to keep it super safe, which I appreciate, but I'm missing some of the functions, especially like the sound bricks, all the lighting options. Missing those big time in modern pieces. Let's move on and check out those modern pieces and see how they fare against the old school stuff. Alright, the next group of pieces I want to discuss are the power functions. And these would have been available anytime after 2011, maybe a little earlier. That's when they started becoming common in circulation. These are the next step in LEGO's powered motorized pieces. And these were pretty popular. Initially, I think that a lot of the fans of the old 9-volt system were upset, especially when it came to the trains situation. I don't have the trains here to show you, but basically the old 9-volt tracks, the tracks themselves were powered kind of in the same style as the pieces, and you could just plug it in and have it run all day. Basically, it worked great. The wires did fragment a little bit, but that's a small note. The power functions trains used a battery pack similar to what you would find in the Technic or other things. This is actually the size comparison of those two, 9-volt and power functions. This one uses AAA, this one uses AA. I think this was the normal configurations for power packs in the powered up range. I don't think they had anything different from this, maybe a few different options at the top of this piece. Anyway, the train from this era, from 2010-ish onwards, it had battery power, and that would run for quite a while, and it did great, but then it would run out of battery in less than a day. And for that reason, fans were not as excited about that versus something you could just plug in and leave. So, however, this is a lot safer than a plug-in powered rail system, and probably a little less expensive to produce too. So I can see why Lego did it. At the same time, I missed some of the functionality that was with the older system. You know, there's some features are lost along the way. So, okay, so power functions had a variety of motors to choose from. In 9-volt, you had the standard square motor and the smaller motor, and a few other pieces as well. This one, you have the standard motor, you have the larger servo motors, you had XL motors, you had a whole bunch of different things to choose from as far as the motors. They worked pretty well. You could just plug them in, very similar to the last iteration. Press the power button, and they would run. And you could switch the direction by using this little switch here. So instead of having two buttons, you have one button and a little switch to change direction. So that's useful. So where they were really able to take it up to the next level was with the IR receivers, the infrared receivers. They use these in order to get more control over the vehicle, in this case like a train or something that you wanted to control from distance. If it was inside a creation, lots of great uses for a remote control. So you use the battery pack, plug in your IR receiver, plug in your motor or your light to whatever you are trying to do. Let's do both, in fact. I think it'll work. As long as your channel is set to the same channel as your remote control, in this case it's set to 1. You have the blue side and the red side. And if this is on, there's the lights. There you go. So with the flick of a switch, the lights will turn on, or so you can use the controller to change what your battery power is doing. So that is really useful for all sorts of different applications. Just being able to move a vehicle, stop a train, have something that's powered light up or move. Super useful. So the IR receiver, a great step forward in technology for Lego powered up pieces. So, now these lights would have been used on a train or other application. They're pretty bright. These are actually duller than I'm used to seeing the new ones work, so I think these are a little bit more used. They work pretty well. They you can put Lego pieces over the top, and they're LEDs, so that's nice, but at the same time, I think that they're not quite as useful as the 9-volt lights, or at least as interesting to play with. Like I mentioned earlier, the power functions pieces like these were a little bit, I don't know, not as greatly received initially, but towards the end of their run, they were very useful, very popular. Lego stopped producing them a couple years ago, and their prices have really increased a lot. I know that 9-volt pieces, anything from the 80s is generally pretty collectible and expensive, but these guys have gone up a lot. I think motors like this go for anywhere, $40, $50, $60 now, when they were originally sold for $15. So they've really gone up. I think it's because they're so useful. So many people could need and use motors like this. So especially as you don't need any phone or technology in order to set these up, which is, I think, the biggest weakness of the next and final iteration of Lego Power Functions, powered up stuff, and motors that we're going to talk about in this video. These are Lego's powered up system. This is the standard hub, the 2-plug hub. It actually looks in size and orientation, very similar to the old Power Functions hub. The only difference is that instead of using their brick snap-on plugs, kind of a legacy from the 9-volt system, they have these little, they almost look like Ethernet plugs or even USB plugs. They're not, they're their own system, but they're very different. There are these plugs here. They actually work great for plugging in and out, but they don't have that Lego stud configuration, which it makes sense because these are even safer than the previous version, but they're just not as exciting as snapping bricks together and having them light up. I don't know. It just has a certain charm to it. This one also uses AAA. You can use AA on certain sizes, I'm pretty sure. This one doesn't say. I'm pretty sure that has... It might be AAAs in there too. Anyway, this is a AA one though. So this one's sealed, so I'm not going to open it because that would lower the value a little bit. This is a pretty expensive piece. So the problem with the powered up pieces is you press the button and nothing happens because you have to program it. You have to have some sort of smartphone. I think it's actually even has to be Bluetooth, Wi-Fi enabled device to operate these guys. That's probably the biggest weakness, probably the biggest deal breaker for a lot of people, and probably the biggest source of confusion for many people who are buying these or having them in their sets. They have difficulty setting them up sometimes. Not everyone's very tech savvy, and it can be a problem. So I'm going to try and get my app open here. Let's see if I'm able to quickly create a little system for us here. It's connecting. You can see on the device here. It's connected, and it does work pretty good. It's pretty user-friendly as far as connectivity. It's a free app. It's not too bad. Works on most devices. However, it's just a big step from a plug-in controller or a plug-in, you just batteries, press the button and it goes, to this. And so I think I have a pre-programmed motor sequence. It's on 20. It's using motor A, so I need to switch the plug. There we go. It's on motor A. And it should work if I hit the play button, but we'll see here. There we go. Okay. First try. Not too bad. This powered up motor is now spinning around. It's at the slowest speed. Let's turn that up a little bit. You can hear the difference as soon as you hit it to 100. Spinning pretty quickly now. So very nice. Yeah. With only 2 plugs, it's a little limiting. On some of the other ones, you could stack them as high as you wanted, and some of them you could stack at least a few different lights and features on there. It does work, but I mean, not every kid has a phone. I know most of them do these days, but not every kid has a phone, so it's like you sometimes have to have an adult help them set it up, especially like just surfing the App Store. There's some questions raised there for some families and people. It works, but that's a downside. And the one plus is there's a lot of wacky features you can add to this. I mean, I think they have sounds, different controls for lights. You can get really quite in-depth with the programming because there's a lot of different elements you can use. A lot of programming concepts are put into this. Kind of reminds me of what I did for school. You have a lot more motors than what we have here on the table. This is just one of the more, this is a Technic-oriented motor. They have snap-down stud versions as well, but they have motors in all shapes and sizes as well, just like the Power Functions. There's also more of the hub designs. Like, for example, Power Functions had these two. 9-volt had a couple different versions besides this one, but not too many. Powered Up has like 4 or 5 different hubs that you can buy with different plugs and different functionality. Like this one's very vehicle shaped. It has 2 built-in motors. It has 2 plugs. So you could do a lot with just this, especially in like a vehicle or a robot shape. This one has 4 plugs. So that's more spots than you would typically be able to attach to a normal battery pack. This also has a lot of battery space and power in there. So that's like a very good for Technic vehicles and that sort of thing. So some strengths for sure, especially with those of us who are more tech savvy and able to really take full advantage of all the programming that's available. However, the initial setup, especially for those who are less comfortable with technology, is going to be a lot more difficult. So it's interesting to see a change in direction for Lego as far as the motors and Power Functions. Not too hard to turn on and off. Once you get used to it, you just have to hold it down and turn it off. Turning on, you just want to tap it once and it usually fires up as long as it's got fresh batteries in there. So all these power function pieces, these powered up 9-volt pieces, overall they all have their strengths and weaknesses. They all have their different applications. You know, I think that as far as functionality, I would kind of lean towards the power function pieces, just because you've got a lot more, I would say, control, especially with like the switches and the infrared, things like that. The powered up is a little less reliable because I don't want to have to always have a dedicated device to my creation in order for it to run. That's probably the biggest weakness for me. However, if you're just at home playing with your train or your vehicle or your robot, whatever you're working with, and you have your phone with you, it's not that bad. It's not the end of the world. The 9-volt stuff I really love because it's so charming and it has some really unique features that they can't really get away with nowadays. Like just the way that it's oriented is so interesting and unique. Hopefully you enjoyed this little tour of all the pieces. Hopefully this, maybe if you're not familiar with these, you haven't used these before, it gives you some idea of how to get started. We will be doing a more advanced video about what you can do with the motors once you get your pieces and you're familiar with the setup process. And we'll be showing you a couple things, maybe some tricks that Steven and I were able to use on Lego Masters, particularly how the crankshaft works and how many different uses you can use for it. So we'll dive into that soon, but thank you so much for sticking with me for this little tour of powered up power functions and 9-volt motors. If you want to hit that like, comment, and subscribe button on your way out, it certainly helps the channel. You guys have a great day. Another video at Element. Okay.